We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions for the final time in 2020.
We're so sorry to see 2020 go.
Oh, indeed.
Everybody,
our
don't let it hit you. Hit you with a good Lord split you. That's what I say.
With our normal audio-only release schedule anyway, this will be the final Friday release of 2020. So Merry Christmas, everybody. I guess we're scheduling this to come out at normal times. It'll be on Christmas Day. So.
Surely people will spend 2 hours with us on Christmas Day.
I mean, if there were ever a year when some people might, it would be this year, because there will be some people who are not with their normal Christmas celebrations. Not that everybody celebrates Christmas, of course, anyway. I think we'll probably have some. You never know.
You're so sick of your family. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to spend some time with my AVRant family. I've been trapped in this house with you people for
I've been on a Zoom call with my family for the past 8 hours. I think I'll spend 2 hours with Tom and Rob in pre-recorded fashion. That's what you're thinking, dear listener. I'm sure of it.
I'm sure of it. Why wouldn't you? And actually, they're listening to figure out how to hook up their new whatever it is that you just got.
There will be some questions. I have little doubt
I am so embarrassed to say that. During the pandemic, I got the. Was it during the pandemic I got the upgraded these speakers, or after the pandemic?
Oh, it was during. Yeah, before. Wasn't it during?
I don't know.
Time has lost all meaning.
Time has lost all meaning. So it was around the start of the pandemic when I got the speaker up, the SVS speakers in here. So I've had those Tower Aperion speakers just kind of sitting around. So during the pandemic, I put them in the back of my friend's car and said, "Take them home. I don't want them anymore."
Wow.
So they have been sitting. So he took them home and hooked them up because he got a brand new house right at the very beginning of the pandemic. So he set them up and then connected them to his receiver, and it was kind of working, but then he said it was being weird. So I came over and I changed some settings and made it not work at all.
Okay.
So I don't really want. I was not comfortable being in this house, so I was like, dude, I'm going to come back later, and I'll fix it. So things have calmed down a little bit. We know a little bit more about how the virus spreads, and he has a very large house. I mean, like huge ceilings and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, I will come in there with a mask on. You stay away from me, and I will fix your receiver and fix this thing. So it was a Vizio, I think M series display, and Onkyo X4000. I wonder where he got that from. Receiver and 2 speakers in the subwoofer. Yeah, that's all he's got in there. So I'm like, okay, well, let me just make sure you've got the speakers hooked up properly. And I look at the back of the speakers. He's got red to red and black to black, or in this case, it was white to red and black to black. And I go to the back of the receiver, and I'm like, so why did you plug them into the surrounds instead of the left and right mains? And he's like, I don't know. So I fixed that, and I'm like, well, surely he's got the left and right. Nope, he doesn't have the left and right correctly either. So the left was to the right, and the right was to the left. So I fixed that, and then went into the settings, and I was like, well, everything seems okay. I'm not really sure why you're not getting this thing to be working. So I went into the TVs, and of course, this is one of the M series that has no remote control, so I have to use his phone to do it.
Oh, one of those. I remember that. Yeah, that year when they had no remote controls, and it came with a tablet. Yeah, I remember that.
That's right. His son has stolen and then broken the tablet, so now he has to use his phone to do it. So I went into and I just turned the speakers off on the Vizio.
Yeah, the TV's
and it was
internal speakers.
Well, if you're not going to use these speakers, then we'll use audio return channel. Yeah. And that was it. I mean, that was literally it. So then I went and I just sort of like played some stuff. I'm like, yeah, the subwoofer is way too low, but I'm not. Like, do you have the measurement mic? Yeah, I'm not going to be calibrating right now. Do you have the measurement microphone that?
No.
Nope. I don't know where that is. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll bring mine from home on a different day. But for now, you at least have speakers that work. So if you are out there, dear listener, and got a brand new receiver and don't know what to do with it, fear not, you are not alone, and we will help you. So email us at question@avrant.com to get your question about your new AV gear, happy, shiny Christmas gear. hooked up properly and calibrated properly, you can come to our website and comment at avrant.com, facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can contact Rob directly at rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's at firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's at avrant_Tom. So yeah, send your questions in, because we know you got them.
Yep.
Right? You got a new PS5. You didn't get a PS5. Don't lie to anybody.
Well, I mean, somebody might have, if they pre-ordered it really early and then just kept it until Christmas. I am attempting to help a listener procure a PS5. I managed to get an order in. It's probably not going to get to me before Christmas, which means it is definitely not going to get to him before Christmas. That there was no chance of that to begin with, and we understand that. But yeah, we're doing our best around here. I wanted to say that that left to left, right to right thing that you mentioned is not necessarily that. Like, it's understandable, because if you are behind your AV receiver facing the seat, then your left to your left is actually your front right speaker. And
is it stage left or audience left? That's the question, right? And every time I hook up a receiver, I have to think about it as well. I'm like, the receiver is facing out, so left is on the left of the receiver, but yeah, I have to think to myself, and I do it every time.
So I don't blame anybody for making that mistake. No. That's very understandable, to be honest.
I do blame him for hooking the mains up to the surrounds. That makes no sense.
That's pretty clearly labeled.
That to me seems. I mean, the guy's not dumb. I mean, he's a smart dude. So I think he's probably smarter than I am, to be honest with you. If you went by pure IQ, but I'm just okay. I guess. I said why, and he was like, "Oh, I mean, like,
I put him in the.
What do you mean?
First, where it looked nice. That's really.
It was smack dab in the middle too. I mean, it's like there's terminals at either end. I mean, it's not like
because some AV receivers, they put front, left, front, right next to each other in the binding post, and some of them put them on opposite ends because they're like, oh, that's going to be physically closest to the speakers, or they'll put the front, left, and front, right in the middle, and then they'll put the surround backs on the very ends. They like.
And, you gotta go back and I gotta go back and recalibrate that thing. That's for sure. That's gonna happen. All right. We want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you can support the podcast in some way. You can do that by going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. And that'll take you to a PayPal donation site. And so we want to thank Manuel for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Manuel.
Yes, indeed, Manuel. Thank you for that PayPal donation. We very much appreciate it.
And if you want to be a ongoing supporter of this podcast, a contributing supporter through the future, from now until eternity, you go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast, where you can sign up to be one of our patrons. We currently have 127 patrons on patreon.com. Every month, a little bit of money comes from them, and it goes to us. Minimum of $1, a maximum of however much you want. And we want to thank our 127 patrons, including Bertrand.
Yes, indeed. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up, think of it as a voluntary subscription if you'd like. And yeah, wonderful to see 127 patrons over there as we're recording this. What are we doing? Monday the 21st, in case anyone wonders why some of the information we say is probably outdated by the time you hear this, because things are going nuts. There's no slowdown in the news. It's ridiculous this year.
That's for sure.
Bertrand, thank you very much for being one of our 127 patrons.
And can I just say to all you people who pre-ordered Cyberpunk 2077, have you learned your lesson yet?
Oh, man.
Have you learned it yet? Because guess when I learned it? I learned it when I pre-ordered Evolve with Rob.
Yes.
Rob and Rob convinced me that that Evolve was coming out and it was going to be the game that we were going to play and it was going to be awesome. I got a subscription to Xbox Live. I pre-ordered Evolve. Evolve showed up. We played it twice and went, this sucks.
Not super
this
fun.
Is literally the worst game I have ever played.
I don't know if I go that far, but I mean, we had such a good time playing Left 4 Dead, and we thought, oh, this is going to be similar to that, and it was not. It was not similar to that.
Is there a Left 4 Dead sequel out now?
Not yet. There was Left 4 Dead 2, which is what we were playing. There is another one coming. It's not called Left 4 Dead. It's something for something. It's like
Back 4 Blood, right?
Back 4 Blood. There you go. That's the one. Yeah.
I was watching people play that on Twitch last night when I was trying to fall asleep, and it was like, this is too loud to fall asleep to.
It's out for the
I would
PC.
like to play that with you, but I do not want to buy a subscription to Xbox Live anymore because I don't want to. So, but I would love to play that game.
I don't think that was out yet, but I don't know if that's just
it might be a beta or something like that for those guys. Could be, probably PC. We could play on PC. I have PC.
I'd have to get a graphics card.
Oh, I don't know if I have a graphics card. I mean, I do, but I have that, whatever. Anyways. So, yes, 2077 guys and gals out there who have pre-ordered this thing. I'm sorry for what you're going through. I mean, I kind of want
to just go get a physical copy so I have a record of the horribleness of it because, like, Sony just pulled it completely off of the PlayStation Store.
Yeah. They're like, you know what?
Forget it. Even for the people with
you get 100% refund.
Which there is no PS5 version yet. And they're like, well, until there is, just forget about it. We'll bring it back when it's ready.
Yeah, this is a ridiculous situation. And I have to say, and I've kind of alluded to this or maybe even mentioned it before, the horrible working conditions within the gaming production side of it and how they treat their workers and stuff like that. And the lengths that gamers will go to explain away developers' mistreatment of their employees is just ridiculous. I'm not necessarily a pro or anti-labor union kind of guy, but it does definitely seem like something needs to change within that industry before too long, because they can't keep treating the people the way they do, setting unrealistic goals, and then essentially throwing them under the bus and firing them whenever things don't go as they promised, even though everybody, I'm sure, on the other side of that conversation was saying, we can't do that. Have you lost your mind? we can't make that deadline. It can't be done. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, okay, yeah, you can do it, though. We believe in you. So I'm a big, I love video games. I like investing in them and playing them and stuff like that. I don't do it nearly as much as I used to, but I will never pre-order another video game for as long as I live, unless something seriously changes. And even then, I'm much more likely to support the small indie studios than I am, like anything from EA or, CD Projekt Red or whatever the name that it was one of the darlings, of the industry, and the horror stories that are coming out from the production of Cyberpunk is disturbing. So, anyways, sorry that you got a broken, trashy, buggy game.
Yes, and that they decided that, you can get a refund until December 21st, because, it's not as though anybody asked for that game for Christmas.
No, so it's sitting underneath a tree right now. Parents who have no idea,
and whose
news feeds will not show up with, you can get a refund, but you can't get a refund on the physical disc anyways. You can only get you can if
it's unopened, but they said it was only refunds until the 21st. I'm like, what a scam.
Yeah. All right. If you can't support our podcast financially, we understand. If you do support us in some way, just let us know what you did, and we will mention it. So Kevin bought a Denon X3600H from Accessories for Less and SVS Prime elevation speakers, and told both Accessories for Less and SVS that it was because of us. Jason found himself in possession of an Amazon Canada gift card that you cannot use in the US, and you can't use an Amazon gift card to purchase another Amazon gift card, so he bought Rob an Ultra HD Blu-ray.
He did.
You gonna tell us what it was?
Ford versus Ferrari. I hadn't purchased it yet. I would like to have it. It was like 90 cents more than his gift card was worth. He's like, yeah, I can swing that. So that was very nice of Jason. I very much appreciate it. It arrived very quickly. So thank you so much for the early Christmas gift. That's what I'll consider it. And Kevin, thank you very much for talking us up to Accessories for Less and SVS.
That's right. And we've also been receiving some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going and not getting sick during COVID. So we want to thank Paul, Kevin, Gurinder, Bertrand, who has been working his way backwards through our episodes. At the time that he wrote, he's on episode 667, and we're on, 720 something?
731 now. Yeah, 32. So this is 732 that we're recording right now.
And then JR and Chris as well. So Paul, Kevin, Gurinder, Bertrand, JR, and Chris. Thank you very much for thanking us.
For sure, Paul, Kevin, Gurinder, Bertrand, JR, and Chris. Really do appreciate the notes of gratitude and encouragement. It is very much appreciated. Bertrand, I'm sure by the time he listens to this, has heard episode 666. That was a fun one. You should come watch the video for episode number 666, Bertrand. That was fun.
I don't remember what
that was the whole Halloween episode. 666
I know
fell
that.
on Halloween. We had our costumes, sort of facial costumes.
This year? This was this year? No, that was last year.
No, that was last year. But he's working his way backwards. So if he was at 667 and going backwards,
I don't even remember what I wore. What did I do? What did I wear?
Don't
spoil it. You'll spoil it for him. Okay.
I know.
All right. So
just remember, you were very hot. You had trouble breathing. You had to take it off quickly. You remember that?
No. So I'm a very old man, and things don't stick in my brain very well.
I'll just say thank you to everyone for continuing to listen and sending in your questions. There you go.
Do you want to remind everybody that if you have gear that you are proud of, rooms that you are proud of, and that you wouldn't mind me using as stock photographs for avgadgets.com, where I am currently the editor-in-chief and writing almost all the content, please send them to me at tom@avrant.com to use, along with a disclaimer that says, or permission that says you can use this as much as you want for AV Gadgets forever. Signed, your name. So send that over to me. Now, in the news, here we have a big surprise. I know everybody sit down for this. You're gonna be shocked, but somehow, even though after months of stalemates, Roku and HBO Max have worked out a deal. I can't imagine how this could have happened. HBO Max is on the Roku devices now ahead of Wonder Woman 84's Christmas Day release. Now, for those of you that don't know, the Roku makes some money from you, but most of the money they make is a cut of the subscriptions that everybody else, you know, that if you're using their device to stream their stuff, then they get a cut of your subscription. So, you know, HBO Max and Roku have not been in partnership for a long time, and the reason almost certainly is because HBO did not want to give them, or Warner did not want to give them as big of a cut as they wanted. But with Warner releasing every movie day and date for the coming year, I think that gave them enough negotiating power where Roku said, yeah, we got to have you. So they probably, I would imagine that's how that conversation went.
I don't know who blinked. We probably never will, because that type of negotiation is not something that they're going to make public. But the thing is, AT&T, who owns Warner Media, they are so desperate right now that if they were the ones who blinked, I wouldn't be shocked. You know, just given the financial situation and their bald desperation to make HBO Max a success. It's just like maybe they both gave a little and they found a compromise. Hopefully, it was done in the Christmas spirit.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to sign up for the free trial on like the day after Christmas. We'll all watch Wonder Woman 84 together as a family, and then I will stream whatever else that they have on there that I've been wanting to see for the next 2 weeks straight, or however long the trial is, and then I'll cancel it because I'm not paying for another service. I just can't do it. HBO Max is also now on the PS5. It was already on the Xbox Series X at launch, but it's now on the PS5 as well.
HBO Max is on pretty much everything now. Yeah, they got that deal with Amazon Fire devices earlier. Now they're on Roku, so that's the big ones. It was already on Apple TV. It was already on Chromecast and Android TV. So now they're on the major game systems. That's pretty much everything. There might be some devices out there that don't have it, but you can probably get HBO Max now.
So Chromecast with Google TV will be getting the Apple TV app and the Apple TV Plus streaming service early 2021, with other Android TV-based devices getting it in the future. That's good, especially for a lot of the TVs out there that use Android as their basic backend to do all the streaming stuff.
Which includes Sony. That's like all Sony televisions.
Right. So then, that's one of the big things is that in order to get the Apple TV, I mean, and iTunes and all that other stuff, you had to have an Apple TV box, or a limited number of boxes that are out there. But now, if they come to Android, that's going to be a lot better.
Yep.
Especially for me, since I ain't buying an Apple box. So the 110-inch Samsung micro LED display that we talked about last week, it's $155,000 instead of the $90,000 that we speculated, or that was speculated, not by us, last week. So it's a tiny bit more.
I mean, good thing, because when it was under six figures, I was like, how am I going to get that? That's so affordable. But now that it's $155,000, it's like, oh well, that's a load off my mind. There's just no way I'm going to buy it now.
Rob's like, I could have 10% down for my house, or I could buy a TV. I have to knock out a wall to get in.
Yep.
So, you know what? If you do buy the TV, though, you could build the house around it. You can install you could build a wall.
I'd have to live inside the shipping
TV
carton.
on it.
That's what I would have to do.
Install a wall, install the TV on the wall, and then build the entire house around that room. That's how you should do it. That's how you should do your home theater.
You buy an old house, an old small house on a larger property where you're going to have to renovate it anyway, and you just tear it all down except for one little slab of concrete and one wall left standing. You mount your 110-inch, and then the rest of the house is constructed.
That's right. You can use those shipping containers that everybody uses.
Done and done. That's right.
All right, from our listener Joe, huge thanks to Joe to replying to Rob's question about the recent firmware update for the Denon X8500H receiver. We can now confirm the Dolby Surround Upmixer is able to use front-wide speakers, and the cheering from 5 to 7 people is almost audible.
It's enough to fill some front wides. That's how loud we are.
And after the DTS X Pro update, the DTS Neural X Pro Upmixer utilizes all 13 speakers, no longer limited to 11 speakers max, and you can cross-pollinate Upmixer. So
yeah.
So
sharing some photos that he shared if you come over to YouTube, but to describe them for the audio listeners, so Dolby Atmos, of course, is Dolby Atmos, all 13 speakers lit up. DTS X is DTS X, all 13 speakers lit up. That's how it was before, but now we can see when you use the Neural X Upmixer on either DTS signals or Dolby signals, all 13 speakers are lit up now. It used to be only 11 of them would be lit up with the DTS Neural X Upmixer, but then the big one, aside from the cross-pollination being back, where you can see that DTS can use the Dolby Surround Upmixer if you so choose, there's a Dolby signal with the Dolby Surround Upmixer applied to it and all 13 lights on. Hooray! Yay! Including the front wides. Yay! Thank you, Joe, by the way. I wasn't going to buy
may have just met the They may have just made the lights light up and the speakers aren't actually getting the information, but that's all Rob really needed. He just needed to see the lights.
I am taking Joe's word for it. He is a fellow front wide fan, and he's like, yep, it works. So thank you very much for letting me know.
Okay. Some comments from listeners here. Chris wanted to thank us for advice last week. You're welcome. Talk to you later. He's following all of it. That's even better. Talk to you later. I don't have to read any more of this. His Golden Era towers are set to small now, and no more subwoofer signal being sent to them. He did a subwoofer crawl, and that resulted in him moving his single, for now, SVS sub to the front of his room instead of his side wall. He actually didn't know about Rob's 12-step guide to setting up dual subwoofers. How? Every week we talk about the dang thing. Now he's aware, and we talked him down from his 2.35 to 1 screen idea and upgrading his projector right away. That means he can get a second subwoofer now. Good. Yay. So, that was just a comment. I guess that's the end of the day.
That's right.
That's good?
Yeah.
There you go. That's good. Yeah. Oh, this is the guy who couldn't go any higher, but wanted to go wider.
He can't make his screen any taller. So I'm looking at it, and I'm like, you've got a little space above your center speaker, although I'm sure it's about sight lines. He's got a second row of seats behind his front row, so I'm sure it's about sight lines. He can't go any higher. He is up against his ceiling. But I'm like, if you're willing for the back row to maybe have a little bit of the bottom of the screen obstructed by a head in front of them, it looks like you could fit a 135 there. That's my opinion.
My opinion is that his front speakers are too wide to begin with. They're really angled in, too. They're really toed in. So, anyways, all right. Carl and Elango both heard the question about slim battery backup and surge protection options to go behind a wall-mounted TV. Carl recommended the $75 CyberPower SL700, a 2 3/4 inch deep with a keyhole mounts for putting it flat on the wall, 5 battery outlets that will only last a few minutes, but just enough to safely shut everything down. And then Longo recommended the $32 Trip Light Ultra Block, which is spelled B-L-O-K.
That's right.
It is, which is surge only, but it allows through the full 15 amps and has a convenient form factor. So there you go.
Yeah, that was very nice. I wasn't aware of that CyberPower one. It was actually like within the series of one that I mentioned that was kind of slim but had the plugs like on the front of it, so it wouldn't really be as slim by the time you plugged something into it. But the 700 model in particular, it is the only one out of that series that has the different form factor where the plugs are actually on the top of it, allowing you to maintain a very slim form factor, and it's clearly meant to be mounted flat on a wall because that's where they put the keyhole mounts. So there you go. Glad to know about it.
Yeah. I will say that this Christmas, my family is all home. I have instructed everybody to be quiet, but, it's also the perfect temperature that I don't need to run AC or heat, which means that I have the window open. And so we'll see. If you hear any extraneous noises, it's almost certainly my feed. But for right now, everybody seems quiet, which means they're all playing video games. Questions. Joe. First up, Joe just wanted to sing the praises of both Marantz and JVC. As mentioned in the news, he got an AV8005 Pre-Pro. He also has an NX5 projector. They've been around for a few years at this point, but they both got recent firmware updates that added new features. I'm going to sneeze. DTS X Pro in the case of the Marantz, and refined frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping in the case of the JVC. Joe thinks it's awesome these companies continue to enhance these products for free. His front wides get to play a lot more sounds now, and the JVC update allows a noticeably more consistent look across all HDR content without having to make any manual adjustments for particular titles, which is very cool. He also is very pleased with his Datacolor SpyderX Pro colorimeter.
Colorimeter, if you just want to say it that way.
I know, but colorimeter, it's that's the way it kind of sounded in my head, but then now that just sounds like a distance.
It does.
So Anyways, it was only $170. Only is, I mean, I thought $170 is pretty expensive. But anyways, not for a meter though, not for a light meter, and has improved his color and gamma. Plus, he can easily run it anytime as the bulb in his projector ages, so he highly recommends it. And the final bit of updates before his question is, he paid his brother-in-law to paint his entire ceiling black with his Sherwin-Williams tricorn black paint, and made a huge improvement to the feel of the room and to cutting down the light reflections that were bouncing off his formerly white ceiling onto his projection screen. Do it if you can, is his recommendation. And I can see what you're saying, but at the same time, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. I will tell you that AVRant did buy me a Christmas present this year. They did. Yeah. For the hefty sum of $20.
Yep.
It bought two 16-foot long LED strips that are D6500, which means that they're the perfect ambient light color, and it has a little knob to control how bright they are. So it has a little dimmer on it. And the two plug into one little dimmer thing. So I'm going to string them around the back of my projection screen, and they have a little self-adhesive. I'm going to string them around, and if they're going to be too long, but it's okay because you can trim them to fit. And I'm going to have an ambient backlight behind my screen for the first time ever. I'm trying it out, guys. For $20, I couldn't resist. Yeah, I'm trying it out.
That'll be interesting to see with a projection screen. That'll worth a try. Didn't cost a ton. Wanted to mention on that Datacolor SpyderX Pro colorimeter that Joe got for himself. So, I mean, some people might be like, oh, that is relatively affordable if you look at other meters, and particularly if you're buying it with, say, the CalMan SpectraCal, calibration software. The software alone costs more than that. So, interested to say, oh, is that a really good alternative? So, nobody is going to claim that the Datacolor Spider all on its own is the equivalent of the professional level equipment that you would get from SpectraCal with the CalMan software. But what this is very good for is particularly for a display like the JVC projector, which is pretty darn close out of the box, or most of the LCD and OLED televisions that we recommend these days that are pretty darn close out of the box. But a lot of times when you measure them, you'll notice that it has just like a little bit too much red only in the upper section, or not quite enough blue, or maybe it'd be vice versa, a little bit too much blue and not quite enough red, or something like that. And for that type of general adjustment, where it's just getting the little bit too much red, a little bit not enough blue, that type of thing, closer to being in line, it is perfectly sufficient for that. So if this isn't what you would use for professional color timing, you're not going to get within, delta errors of less than 1 for that type of thing. But for just detecting and adjusting a little bit of red push, or a little bit of green push, or not enough blue, whatever it is, something like that, pretty good for that type of thing. And that's what he found. And also, it is the sort of thing that over the age of a bulb, it tends to dim in red faster than the other colors. You'd be able to detect that with a meter like this and make some adjustments and have it closer to neutral. So yeah, good job.
All right. So yeah, I mean, his room does. I mean, the front of it is very black, and the ceiling is very black, and everything's very black. But and I'm sure it looks good. I just can't.
It looks good in the photos without an image on the screen.
trying to explain to some. I mean, I understand people would walk in and see it and understand,
yes.
but you know, if you were to try to sell your home, I'd be like, oh, I mean, painting white over that black ceiling is going to be so many coats, just so many coats. Just take
gray
forever.
Primer, then a lighter gray primer, then a white primer, then paint.
Yeah. So his question is, he wrote to Geek Acoustics and Acoustic Frontiers to ask what he should do in terms of acoustic treatments on the ceiling. Since he has a full immersive audio system, they both suggested diffusion. The rest of his room's acoustic treatments are DIY, so isn't sure he wants to pay hundreds of dollars for either a Viacoustic multifuser that Acoustic Frontiers recommended, or Geek's grid fusers. He was thinking of making more absorption panels, mounting them as a cloud in the middle of his ceiling, and then giving them a slatted wood covering to act as a scatter plate. What do we think we should do? I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I am unconvinced that diffusion on your ceiling is the number. I don't believe that is the recommendation that everybody should follow. I have experienced diffusion on the ceiling before. I have found that it has made little to no difference in the positive, and sometimes quite a bit of difference to the negative. Now, I know that's what everybody says, but I am always very suspect of what everybody says. You know, the sort of you know, group think of room acoustics is absorption on your walls, and then you put diffusion on your ceiling, and I just haven't seen the evidence that it's really as effective as people think that it is. I think if you can put absorption on your ceiling, you put absorption on your ceiling, and Bob's your uncle. I don't worry about the diffusion all that much. That's my opinion, but I'm sure Rob's got a different one.
Yeah, I can't say I'm in full agreement with that. What I will agree with is that we come back to that 30-70 rule just on the absorption side, which is that if you've already managed to cover approximately 25 to 30% of the surfaces in your room, so that's all 6, if you've fully carpeted your floor, that takes up a good chunk of that percentage. And then if you already have, like he's treated his entire front wall, because it's basically a front wall up there, and then if he has additional treatments on his side and back walls, he could already be quite close to the 30% mark just in absorption. If you're not, then adding absorption to your ceiling makes sense. It can help you get to that 25 to 30% mark. Then from 30 to 50% of your room surfaces, an additional 20% of the surfaces, it's pretty good most of the time in most rooms to have diffusion. So to me, it's a little bit playing it about what percentages you already have and what adding more absorption and adding diffusion will get you to. In my own room, you know, I carpeted floor, plenty of absorption on all the walls. I had like the slightest last bit of a, you know, you clap your hands sharply and there's the slightest last bit of a little zing that still existed in my very small home theater, and putting diffusion and only diffusion on my ceiling cleaned up that last tiny little bit. Did it make an effective difference on like the frequency response of my speakers or anything like that? No, not at all. It was just I could still detect that tiny last little bit of a zing in a sharp clap test, and the diffusion on my ceiling got rid of that. So I think it's appropriate when it's appropriate, and it's more to do with the percentages in your room. Now, if you have already detailed to someone like Geek, here's all the acoustic treatment I already have, and they come back to you saying, well, we'd recommend some diffusion on your ceiling. Like, I don't think that's wrong. I think it's very possible that is the way to go.
Yeah, see, I doubt it. I think that when you say ceiling, people say diffusion no matter what. And much like when we talk about why SVS recommends subwoofers based on what speakers you have versus your room size, you know, it's safer for them. And when they say if you have a ported sub, get another ported sub, it's safer for them to say that because it's the same opinion that you're going to find if you do a Google search. And if you Google search diffusion on your ceiling or absorption on your ceiling, you're going to find recommendation after recommendation for diffusion. And I think that most people don't get anywhere near that 30% absorption on their walls and everything else. You might, Rob, but I bet if you had put absorption on your ceiling instead of diffusion, you probably would have had the same. My guess would be that zing that you were. Yeah,
it would have got rid of the zing. It might have made the room overly dead though, because that's. That can happen. So, I mean, the thing is, in Joe's case, the good news is that he has actual speakers in his ceiling. So I'm less concerned about like the concern about putting too much absorption on your ceiling if you have, say, upward firing Atmos speakers. Again, we don't really know how much is actually bouncing off the ceiling, but if any amount is actually bouncing off the ceiling, and then you put absorption right up there at the first reflection points, exactly where they're supposed to be bouncing their sound, they're definitely not bouncing their sound off the ceiling anymore. But when the speakers are in the ceiling already, it's not as though putting absorption next to them on the ceiling is somehow going to prevent them from sending out their sound. So the thing is, whether you put some absorption on your ceiling, if you did, my general recommendation would be to put, similar to the way that you treat your walls. You'd have absorption at the first reflection point of the ceiling. If you have more treatment than that, it would be diffusion, but probably directly overhead you would have diffusion, and maybe a little bit behind you on the ceiling you would have diffusion. The idea being your surround effects can still bounce around, then the energy is kept in the room, but it diffuses the sound. So that I could certainly go with that approach. I do, where Tom and I definitely agree is, I don't know how much you're going to notice it either way. I mean, if you completely covered your ceiling wall to wall in absorption, you'd probably notice the entire room sounds deader. That I would expect. Yeah. But if you're just spot treating, like, I don't know how much you're going to know. Are you noticing an issue that you think only treating your ceiling is going to improve? Or is this just a matter of, I like to continue doing things in my theater and here's one more thing I can do? If it's the latter, and I suspect that it is, I don't know how much you're really going to notice.
Do you really, after painting your whole ceiling black, do you really want to put some wood slatted things up there? I mean, I guess you have to paint those black as well too. But then it already looks. You already have a black ceiling, which is a little odd. Now you're going to have black things attached to your black ceiling. If you're not noticing a difference, a problem, I wouldn't worry about it. If you are, you've DIY'd some acoustic panels already. Just take some of the ones that you have, throw them up there, see if that makes the difference that you want. If you're thinking, or even just tack a blanket up there, a comforter, up there, and see. I mean, you could do a whole lot of stuff, but I mean, if the first reflection point, I would absorb that before I would diffuse it. Number one, I can get on board. And what Rob is saying, put the diffusion over your head or slightly behind. That's fine too. Even though I really feel like diffusion is not nearly as effective in home theaters as absorption is, because there's already enough things in the room, usually not in your room because you have a dedicated theater, but usually in most people's rooms they have, like, bookshelves and cases and stuff like that, and there's all sorts of other things that can bounce sounds around. We really are trying to absorb them more. And if you haven't gotten towards that 30% yet, I mean, I just throw some of that up on the ceiling, call it good. So if he ignores it all and he's just like, regardless, I'm going to put some diffusion on the ceiling, in terms of what to purchase or make, I did want to point out, like, the GIC grid fusers are not actually as expensive. If you just look at the price, you're like, whoa, that seems expensive. There's 4 of them in the package for that price. So they end up being about $55 each, which is not super duper cheap, but it's not outlandishly expensive for a 2 foot by 2 foot treatment. I would, like, you don't need more than 8 of them. You don't need more than 2 packages of them. That is well more than enough for the size of room that you have. So yes, that you'd be looking at, after shipping, about $500. You can probably build something for a lot less than that. If you just look at the design and copy it by making it out of some not too heavy wood, maybe you go with some like white pine or something like that that isn't too heavy. You can basically just copy the design and make that yourself if you want to. You do want to have the various sizes. You don't just want like a uniform depth to everything. You want various depths. That's what makes it into a diffuser. But yeah, you could copy the design, or just, do take note. It's not actually that crazy expensive. The multi-fusers are like over $200 each. So it's a big difference. Right. All right. Brendan in Australia, Melbourne, as they say, not Melbourne, Melbourne, Australia. Brendan appreciated our suggestions on how to tackle the acoustics in his room. We mentioned CMF Acoustics in Australia, and they're in Melbourne, so just like he is, so he can avoid the shipping costs. He found them online just before we mentioned them, so since we said their panels looked reasonable, he ordered an art panel from them that will go on his back wall. He also took my suggestion, and he'll add bookshelves on this back wall on either side of the art panel, hopefully covering the back wall like that will improve with acoustics. He's also ordered a thicker rug, because he does have a very thin rug. It's very thin, which is actually pretty Australian, to be honest with you. They have that sort of European, Scandinavian sort of aesthetic a lot. Though Melbourne does feel a little bit more traditional than some of the other parts of the country. He wanted to follow up about potentially getting an SVS sub it wasn't just about what will improve dialogue intelligibility the most. He wants to know if we think his Martin Logan Dynamo 12-inch sub is sufficient for his room all on its own, or whether he should pair it with an SVS, and if so, which SVS model. So his room is 16 feet by 21 feet by probably, let me take a look at this. It looks like 8, maybe 9.
8 or 9. I don't think it's higher than 9.
Yeah. It doesn't look like it's 10, but if you look at the door,
sure,
there's quite a little bit of room above there. So it's between 8 and 9 feet would be my guess. So the Martin Logan, he's got the 1100X, I believe. Which
is a weird model number for a 12-inch driver, but it is a 12-inch driver and a 650-watt amplifier, sealed design.
Sealed, right. So, I mean, obviously the SVS equivalent would be in between the 2000 Pro, the SB 2000 Pro, and the 3000 series, but probably the 2000
Pro
would
is
be the one.
is right there,
close enough,
right there with it.
Yeah. Is this enough? Is this the right subwoofer for your room? It is, in my opinion, very close.
Yeah.
You're probably asking this sub to do a lot for what it, a lot more than a lot of people. You don't have as much headroom.
Sure.
But I think it's probably doing fine. I would not look at this sub and say to you, yeah, you should get a different sub. I would not say that.
If you were writing to us and saying my number one priority is full reference volume all the time, then I might be like, time to bump up. But I severely doubt that it is reference volume all the time in here. So in terms of just raw output, I don't think you're underpowered. The question then becomes is, do you want better uniformity across all your seats? He's got quite a few seats in here. Definitely not all centered aiming at the TV. If you really only care about one seat and you're getting good response, you play a bass sweep with your current setup in the one seat that you care about, and that bass sweep sounds pretty darn good. There's no particular frequencies where it just drops out and is almost silent or anything that's crazy, crazy loud, and that's all you care about, then you don't need to get a second subwoofer. But if you care about all the seats in your room, then the only way to have a more uniform response in all of those seats would be to get a second sub, and I would suggest putting it on your back wall, about the same distance from the left wall as your current sub is from your right wall. So diagonally opposite from your current sub.
Yeah, your back wall's empty.
That's right.
So you've got plenty of room back there. So in getting the SB 2000 Pro would be I think the right sub to match with this one. They play around the same. I think that the Martin Logan is geared down to 22 hertz.
That's what they
minus
claim.
3 dB. That's what they claim. So I think that's pretty close to what SBS is going to be giving you. If you were saying to us, well, it sounds really good in here, but I'm not getting that rumble. I'm not feeling the shake. Like, well, yes. Then I literally, you could just go to the PB 2000 Pros or the cylinders, and that would give you the extra headroom and the extra low end extension that you would be looking for. You would sell your Martin Logan. And then get 2 of the SVSs, whichever the ported models that would work for you. You could stay sealed and go up to the 3000, but that's asking. That's a lot of money. Yeah. That's a big difference in cost when you can just, buy a couple.
If you're like, I'm already satisfied with the output and extension, but I just want better uniformity across all my seats, then an SB 2000 Pro for sure would be the nice match with your existing Dynamo Martin Logan.
Yeah, Martin Logan, makes some pretty nice little subs. And it's so I got no problems recommending you stay with that one. There's no reason to change that sub, not in this room size at least. Paul is trying to decide between the Xbox Series X and the PS5. You can't have either one of them; they're all sold out. Sorry.
At some point, there'll be more.
There'll be more. That's right. He's only going to get one of them. He says he's a casual gamer and only plays occasionally. He uses this 85-inch Sony X900 HTV and an Onkyo RZ810 receiver to run a 5.2.2 audio system that can pass through 4K HDR and Dolby Vision, but it does not have HDMI 2.1. It also does not have eARC, so his intention is to connect the console to his AV receiver and the receiver to his TV and forego the 120 hertz and VRR and all that other stuff. For the time being, he might upgrade his receiver in a year or two when HDMI 2.1 issues have all been worked out. So his questions. So Series X supports Dolby Vision, PS5 does not. Does that make a noticeable difference in gaming? He only plans to use the console for games, not streaming video, or as an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Is Dolby Vision even included in games? I didn't think it was.
Not yet.
Is that
the Xbox Series X does not currently, as we're recording this, support Dolby Vision in games yet. However, they have clearly stated that they will, that the system is capable of it, that some games in the near future will use it, whereas the PlayStation 5 just doesn't support Dolby Vision at all. The only, just flat out does not support Dolby Vision on the PlayStation 5 under any circumstances. Okay, let's see. Right now, neither of them can even get a consistent experience in HDR from game to game. They have a system-level setting for HDR, doesn't get applied to all games, gets applied to some here and there. The ones that it does get applied to, it's not uniform across all of them. You basically have to adjust it in every single game. Every single game that has HDR does give you its own HDR calibration adjustments that are specific to just that game, and that's basically what you need to use. So will Dolby Vision somehow solve all of those problems? No. In fact, I suspect it's probably going to make some of them worse. I don't trust it for 1 second that this is going to be the solution to consistent HDR, and not all games are going to use it anyway. So this is not the reason to choose one over the other. This will end up being a wash, and let's hope that the high dynamic range gaming interest group, I'm like, nah, it's never going to be applied across everything. I guess I can say I hope it would be, but it's never going to be. So anyway, this is not the reason to choose one or the other.
All right, so Series X supports Atmos in games. The PS5 does not. Does that make a big difference? I mean, I don't know that I would care that much. I mean, I don't even know. I would be surprised if the games were truly encoded, and mixed with the thought of Atmos in mind, and not like headphones or or 5.1. Yeah. I think would be my guess. But I mean, I don't think I would worry about that.
I mean,
let's see what Rob
I haven't
says.
played enough to make a big notice of it. PlayStation 5 at the moment, its focus is basically entirely headphones. That's the only place where their proprietary Tempest 3D audio works. The PlayStation 5 still having audio glitches if I set it to uncompressed PCM. So I've just been setting it to output 5.1 Dolby Digital to my 11 speakers and letting my AV receiver upmix that 5.1 Dolby Digital audio. Man, we're living in the future. But I mean, it sounds completely fine that way. It's
the upmixers are so good these days. That's the reality, is that the upmixers are so good. I almost wish that they just wouldn't even try.
I know, right?
Like if you're gonna do it badly, just do 5.1 right, and let my receiver do the rest.
Well,
of it.
yeah, I mean,
because the receiver can do it.
It's not the Xbox One where I'm defaulting to outputting it in stereo anymore. I'm actually defaulting to outputting in 5.1. So I mean, on my Series X, I have it set to output Atmos. That means my AV receiver always reports that it's playing Atmos. I can't even really tell if the game actually is being rendered in Atmos or if the Xbox is just upmixing it, because it does upmix it. I guess I can go put my ear against surround back speakers, which I don't even use all the time, but I guess I could set some up and put my ear against them to see, because if it's being upmixed, the upmixer in the Series X does not put any sound in the surround backs, and if a game is truly being rendered in Atmos, it might. But
might.
It might.
Wow. There's a crown.
Once again, I am not going to say that this is the reason to choose one of them over the other. Both of them at present have some audio glitches. I've lost my center channel on both of them, which requires just turning my AV receiver off and back on again. And oh, there came back my center channel. Some weird stuff going on. I wouldn't make this the reason to choose one or the other.
Next, he asks, is the PS5 controller a big improvement over the Xbox? Seems like quite a few people online are saying that's the case. I haven't held either one of them, so what say you, Rob, since you've had your hands on both?
I generally have to agree with this. The PlayStation 5 controller, if you enjoy that sort of thing, and honestly, if you're a casual gamer, you might enjoy it even more than a hardcore gamer, which is that the haptic feedback, it is more subtle than the just general rumble, which is what the Xbox controller has, but it's the triggers, the adaptive triggers that can make it feel like you are, like, they can make it very difficult to pull down at first and then click like a real trigger does. If you're actually shooting a gun, each different gun that you're shooting can have a different trigger feel to it. If you're playing something with a bow and arrow, it actually puts tension on it. That gets greater and greater the more you pull the trigger. So those triggers are a pretty neat thing, along with the haptic feedback and the speaker that's built in that can give you some pretty interesting feel to the games. I think it's a unique feature to the PlayStation 5. I bet Microsoft is going to copy it in about a year and have a new Xbox Series X controller with adaptive triggers. I really think that's on its way. But until then, I think this is a differentiator. So yeah, that's a tick in the PlayStation 5 side, in my opinion.
So he's used picture settings for his X900H. They say they use the custom picture mode as the starting point for movies and TV. That's working well for the rest of his sources that he has plugged into his Onkyo's receiver, but when he plugs his gaming console into his Onkyo, that will end up using the same custom picture mode too, correct?
If it's the same output to the same input, then by default it would.
Yep. Yeah. Will that result in noticeable lag if he doesn't switch the X900H to the game picture mode? He isn't keen on having to switch picture modes back and forth. Noticeable lag? I would guess not. You know, it depends on I guess it depends on what game you're playing. But
to a hardcore gamer, it would, because it's a difference between like getting close to single digit latency in the game mode versus about 60 or 70 milliseconds in the custom picture mode. Now, plenty of us, it depends on the type of game you're playing. We could live with 60 or 70 milliseconds. It's not going to be the end of the world. But if you're playing a Twitch game that relies on the fastest response time at all, that it's a significant difference. That's several frames of animation that have gone by before it responds. So here's what I would say to this. So, okay, some people are going to be saying, hey, the Xbox Series X, it has auto low latency mode, but that will not get through his Onkyo receiver.
Right.
It doesn't support it. So that's not going to work there. Now, there's a weird thing where if you put your Sony TV into the like auto detect picture mode weird thingy that it has there instead of auto low latency mode, it can like detect when you've connected a PlayStation 5, but I don't know if that'll work through the AV receiver. And worse than that, when you go back to a movie, it'll probably put you back to standard mode, not custom mode as you want it to. So again, you'd be looking at it. Here's what I would suggest. Your RZ810 Onkyo receiver has two HDMI outputs. I would suggest to you, if you're willing to, use both of those outputs on your Onkyo, have one of them going to a different HDMI input on your Sony television, and that, because it does remember on input versus input which picture mode you're using. So you have one input that you've set for your movies and games, and that uses the first output of your Onkyo, and then you have a second HDMI input on your Sony television that is just for games instead of movies and television, and that's set to the game picture mode, and you use the second HDMI output, because you're not going to have any problems with like differences between Dolby Vision support or something weird like that, because it's the same display. So it's fine to have both HDMI outputs going to it, just two different inputs, and then you're just switching inputs on your TV. Hopefully that's easy enough. Right.
So what about VRR and auto low latency mode? Once again, Series X has those, PS5 does not. He'd need a new receiver with HDMI 2.1 to take advantage of those anyways, wouldn't he? And what do those features really even do? Are they a big deal? Well, since you need a new receiver before you can take advantage of them, the differences between the two consoles are over time they're going to implement the VRR.
Yeah, PlayStation 5 is supposed to be getting those anyway via firmware update.
So if you are going to be waiting to get a receiver, then I don't think that this should be a deciding factor in your because by the time, I mean, unless it's whether or not the audio works properly, which clearly the Xbox is never going to do.
It's historically not too bad right now. It's not. We
only lose our center channel sometimes.
Center channel sometimes.
It's not so bad.
Nothing important coming out of that channel.
Nothing important. Clearly. So yeah, I don't think that I would worry too much about this in the long term, since you are going to be waiting to get a receiver. I mean, what it comes down to, and it really, there's a lot of like consumer loyalty towards one console versus another, but what it really comes down to is what games do you want to play the most. More than, if you are buying a game console, you do not buy the game console because it has VRR, because it has auto low latency, or any of these other things, or even Dolby Atmos or Dolby Vision. None of those things make any difference, because there's games you're going to be able to play on the PlayStation that you won't be able to play on the Xbox, and vice versa. I mean, unless it's Cyberpunk 2077, then you can't play it on anything.
Oh, you can still play it on your Xbox if you want to put "play" in quotation marks.
Yeah, don't save anything. Don't put too much in your inventory when you hit save, because if the save file is too big, it corrupts. So, you know, little minor glitches,
system.
nothing major.
I mean, just to explain what VRR and auto low latency mode are, variable refresh rate is the system itself is not necessarily rendering a frame exactly every 60 times a second or exactly every 120 times a second, just like a computer. It can dip sometimes. So it might be targeting 60 or targeting 120, but it's actually making 55 or it's actually making 112 or something like that. If your television supports variable refresh rate, your TV will synchronize itself to the actual frames being rendered by the system. And this means you never get any, like there's a thing called tearing, where sometimes the frames are not perfectly synchronized with the refresh rate of the television, so you get part of the first image and part of the second image that gets shown at the same time, and so they don't perfectly line up, and you end up with what looks like a tear in your image. So variable refresh rate removes that because the TV now synchronizes itself to refresh at exactly the same rate that frames are coming out of the system. If you leave either of these systems at 60 hertz instead of 120, like they are just locked. They're just locked at 60 hertz. Maybe they'll dip to 59 every once in a while. Now, of course, future games are going to require more and more resources, and eventually these, day one PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X will struggle to run certain games at 60 frames a second, just like the Xbox One can't run any of the modern games at even 30 frames a second anymore. The day one version can't. So yeah, that's what's going on there with variable refresh rate. Auto low latency mode is where the television is supposed to detect, hey, I'm playing a game now, I'm going to automatically go into game picture mode, which is kind of what you wanted it to do. In your case, it might be okay, but like you say, it's not going to work through your current AV receiver, so that ends up being a moot point. And also, the whole idea was that if I'm playing a game, it goes into game mode. If I'm watching a video, it goes into my movie mode or custom mode. But it doesn't do that. It just stays in game mode all the time because it's an Xbox. So it doesn't really even do what it's supposed... Like, you know, when you go and switch to Netflix, it doesn't change out of game picture mode. It stays there. It still says you're using auto low latency because the signal's coming from an Xbox. So it doesn't really do what it's supposed to do anyway. And yeah, there you go. So we already basically answered your last question, which is like, what do we recommend? Which games do you want to play? That's what it comes down to.
Do you want to play Halo?
Yeah, right.
Or do you want to play God of War? Right. Which one are you more excited about?
I will say that if you don't even really know what you want to play, and you're willing to pay a monthly subscription, or maybe even you subscribe for a month and then stop subscribing until you're ready to play again, Xbox Game Pass is an advantage that Xbox offers you. You pay for it. You don't actually purchase any games. You just pay the monthly fee for Xbox Game Pass, and now you have at least 100 games to just download and play as much as you want, as long as you remain a subscriber. PlayStation doesn't have that yet. If it's super successful, I'm sure they'll develop something in the future, but they don't have an equivalent system yet. What they do have is if you subscribe to PlayStation Plus, they give you, I think it's 20 of the most popular high-end games from the PlayStation 4. So they give you an existing library just for subscribing. But other than that, for all your PlayStation 5 games, you're just purchasing them piecemeal on the PlayStation. So yeah, there's a deal to be had there with Xbox Game Pass because all Microsoft first-party games show up day and date on release date on Xbox Game Pass without you having to actually buy them outright. They're just there as part of your subscription. So that might be the thing that tips you over. But if you're like, the games I want to play are Sony exclusives, it solves it. There's no technical reason to avoid either of them.
Right. Okay. Kevin recently set up his kids' playroom, which is secretly Kevin's PS5 and Xbox Series X room after they go to bed. He's got a 4.1.4 configuration, okay? With an LG B9 OLED for the display. He has lots of size and placement constraints, and everything needs to be off the floor with a clean look. For those reasons, he paid extra to get the JL Audio D110 sub, SVS Prime Elevation surround speakers, and Sonance in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. They're all powered by his Denon X3600H, and they've all exceeded his expectations, so he's very pleased with all of those. His surround speakers had to go
a bit higher.
A bit higher than he wanted because of a window, but the Prime Elevations Rock and the JL Audio cost twice as much as a PB1000, but he needed the extremely compact size, and it turned out great. So good. But he has one big disappointment. That's his front left and right speakers. He's got no center, so they're extra important. And he went with the KEF T101 ultra slim on-wall speakers. Compared to everything else in the system, they're awful. I think awful is being a bit extreme, but it's only in comparison to everything else.
And
so
everything else he's got is very, very good. So I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah. They're a little bit better than the built-in speakers of his B9 OLED, but not much. I have a feeling that that's not exactly true, but let's go on. For the price he paid, and that's not good enough. So he has size constraints. The front left and right speakers cannot be wider than 7 inches, and they cannot be taller than 19 inches. They need to look good, mounted on the front wall, and they need to sound better than the KEF T101s. What do we suggest? He's come across ELAC Muros, but they're more than he wants to pay, and he's seen DefTech and Canon on walls, but he isn't sure about those. What's our take? My first thought, and I did not do any research on this, is to go to RBH and see what they've got, which is what I'm going to do right
the
now.
Ultra ones.
Yeah, those are and they may be more expensive than what,
they're not cheap.
He's willing to spend, but they would be RBH, you can guarantee is going to have a good sound that you're going to be happy with, regardless of what. So it's Ultra One on-wall speaker, and it's not going to have a price in here.
Not at RBH's own website. Yeah. No.
Oh, it does. I'm sorry. They are $461.95 each with free shipping.
Ooh, okay.
Yes. So they're pricey.
Yeah, that's more expensive than even
how much
the
is he looking? Yeah, okay. I was going to say how much was he looking to pay.
Yeah, the ELACs he said were I think $350 or $400 each.
So these are 1 inch and 5/8 thick, 18 inches tall, and 6.5 wide. So I think they're too tall as well.
No, he said 19 max. So
he said
it
19.
Would just fit.
So I'm gonna be honest with you. This would still be my recommendation, even though they're more expensive than anything that Rob's saying. This is going to have the perfect look that you're looking for. Very, very thin.
Yes.
Just like what you had, except they're RBH, so they're going to sound very, very good. The last time I heard a very thin RBH speaker, it blew me away. So they are expensive. There's no doubt about that. But I think if you're going for quality and you've been willing to pay money for very good quality, this would be, I think, my top recommendation and my top dollar recommendation. Anything else I think would be a compromise.
All right.
But go on, Rob.
So just looking at the speakers he already has, the immediate speakers that I would choose from a sound quality perspective and a reasonable price would be Ascend's HTM 200 SEs. They are compact. They're 6 inches deep, so they're definitely deeper than the T101s or the RBH Ultra ones. They're deeper than those. But once you have the grill on, they have a nice sleek look. And yeah, 6 inches deep, so then they can absolutely be wall mounted. They have the keyhole mount on the back. Size wise, they'll fit perfectly fine, and they're $300 a pair. So they're definitely less expensive and sound
a lot cheaper. And
sound quality wise, I mean, they're going to match wonderfully with the Sonance in-ceiling speakers. That's what Dave recommends they match up with. And Dave from Ascend Acoustics, who's the owner and creator over there. And then, with the Prime Elevation speakers, they're going to match really, really nicely with those too. So sound quality wise, price wise, as long as you're okay with the looks and the size, with the 6-inch depth, that's where I would point you. Now, the other on-walls that I like quite a bit are Klipsch's. They are not going to sound like the rest of your speakers.
No, they're not.
No, but they have
the horn and everything.
Yeah, very, very efficient, as you would expect from Klipsch, and in my opinion, pretty darn good sounding. $230 each is the list price for the 140Ds, which are the smaller variant that just has a single woofer, but a nice slick look, and they're only 2.4 inches deep, so thinner than the HTM 200 SEs from Ascend, not as thin as the T101s. Now, they do have a larger one, the 240D, which has 2 drivers in it. Those are $350 each, though, now. So now we're pretty much close to the price of the ELACs that you already looked up there. And there's honestly not much reason to get the bigger one. It's mostly a looks thing, because there are people who are like, I just don't want the single woofer and the tweeter for my center. I want one that has a woofer on either side of the tweeter just because of the way that it looks. And that's kind of why the 240 exists. So yeah, there you go. One of those 3 will do you.
Keith. To his pleasant surprise, Keith managed to get through checkout and place an order for a PS5. It will be going to his great room, where, between Keith and his 2 teenagers, they watch a lot of streaming content, occasionally watch movies, and game for a couple of hours a day. It's never dark in this room, but it isn't overly bright, and there's no direct sunlight onto the television. He's been rocking the Panasonic Plasma for the past 10 years. He's had no issues with burn-in, with the usage he's just described, and the sound system is 5.1, using Paradigm bookshelf speakers and a Pioneer Elite receiver with 2 whole HDMI inputs. He has no plans to upgrade to Atmos or 7.1 in this room. It's time for an upgrade, though, and he wants all the 4K HDR and gaming goodness. He subscribes to the idea of buying the best gear he can afford at the time and keeping it for a good long while. So, should he get an OLED? He'd love a screen size increase, so he's thinking the 77-inch CX. Any reason he should go with an LCD or a different model instead. If you're going from a plasma, I don't think you're going to be happy unless you go with an OLED, to be honest with you.
If you've been fine with a plasma under your current usage, an OLED will be even more robust than a plasma is in terms of burn-in, so you should be fine with an OLED.
Even if you went for the highest LCD number of of local dimming zones and everything else, you're still going to notice a little bit of blooming on that starry sky and stuff like that. You are going to notice the difference. The blacks are never going to be as good as you have experienced them on the plasma.
He mentioned, he loves the deep inky black levels of his Panasonic Plasma. I'm like, then you're in for a treat with an OLED, because they're even better than plasma, if you can believe it, and they genuinely are. So given that he said, we're already using a Panasonic Plasma this way, and it hasn't been a problem, then an OLED will not be a problem. I am completely confident in saying that. Yeah, this is not if you can use the TV as much as you've been, plasma as much as you've been using it without any burn-in or any of that stuff, you'll be fine. So he's very aware that we've said this is a bad year to buy a receiver, but what if he just plugs the PS5 directly into his new TV and then relies on eARC, particularly in his case where Atmos isn't a concern? What receiver would we recommend? Well, right now, if you're going to have to buy a receiver, I'm still pointing you towards a Yamaha. Okay. And the V6A would be a great choice in here, honestly.
Yeah. And you get more HDMI 2.1 inputs. You may or may not be able to plug it directly through it, your gaming system through it, to get to your new TV.
Not until the firmware update comes out, which has been promised but not delivered yet.
Yeah, but I think eventually you'll be able to. I think eventually they'll work that stuff out. But even if you can't,
with the PlayStation 5, it's okay. That's the system he said he got. It's only the Xbox that's having a problem getting through AV receivers right now, HDMI 2.1 receivers. So. I think that I'm fully on board with that, actually. And as people have been pointing out, if you go to Costco, if you're a Costco member, they have their version of it now. What are the letters that go before? It ends in a 700 anyway. I'm forgetting the exact letters that go in front of it, but it is the V6A, just by a slightly different name, that ends in 700 that you can get at Costco for like $50 or $100 less than the V6A. I think that's a really good choice, because it basically is future-proof. It does actually have HDMI 2.1. It tops out at 7 speakers, but you're only using 5. So, and even if you just want to rely on eARC, then it definitely has that. So, I think that's the perfect choice.
Yeah, if you got to buy a receiver this year, it's Yamaha. Yamaha is your go-to. JR had a Denon 3310 CI receiver for years. That is an older receiver. The CI versions were before the X series came out. Good receivers. He felt it was time for an upgrade, so he bought a X3700H. One of the reasons he upgraded is because one of his stereo analog inputs on his 3310 went bad. He was having dropouts and loud distortion. The source he was using is his Blue Sound Node 2i network music streamer connected via AudioQuest RCA cables. He switched to a different analog input on his 3310, and it seemed to be working fine, but the original analog inputs he was using were kaput. He figured it was just the age of the receiver, so he was looking forward to his new X3700H, but after only a couple of days, his stereo analog inputs that he was using for his Node 2i went bad in exactly the same way as his 3310. He's still within the return exchange window. Furthermore, his brother had some faults and annoying issues with his Denon receiver. His brother switched to Marantz. Yes, JR is aware both Denon and Marantz are actually part of Sound United and basically share the exact same things. Different faceplates, but whatever. So is it a fluke? The same stereo analog input failure cropping up in two Denon receivers years apart. Is this a Denon problem? Should he switch to another brand? Or could his Node 2i be the issue? It has the option to set its analog outputs to either fixed or variable. He set them to fixed as recommended in the manual connecting to an AV receiver integrated amp or something else. He just doesn't want to have to keep dealing with analog audio dropouts and distortion and failing analog inputs. There is no way I believe that it's the receivers in this case.
I mean, it's not utterly impossible for someone to have horribly bad luck where two
how many
receivers
times we've had listeners who've had like 4 different amps go out on them for no reason in the same subwoofer. So yes, coincidences do happen, but correlation does not equal causation here. 2 things can go wrong. I mean, there's so many possible reasons this could be.
I have one. To me, key culprit suspect though.
Is it the cables?
It is the cables in this case.
It's the cables, right? Yeah, AudioQuest cables was, when I read that I was like, ooh.
Yeah,
because they make some funky cables that do some things.
They do,
for no
including
reason.
the, I mean, not unique to them, practice of only connecting the shield of an RCA plug to one end. Now, the reason they do that is to quote-unquote prevent ground loops, which it will, by forcing the voltage that should be getting shunted to ground down your neutral wire. Because that's what'll happen when you don't actually physically connect the shield of a cable and give it a ground path for that voltage to go. AudioQuest does that, and if it's anything, I think it's that. Because if you do have any difference in potential between your source device and your AV receiver, and now you have nowhere for that difference in potential to get shunted to because the ground of the wire isn't connected properly, the shield of the wire, that means that overvoltage is getting sent into the RCA input. Given that this has happened twice and it's been from the same setup, like I don't think it's the blue sound unless there's something just wrong with your particular unit, because there are plenty of people who have it and no one else is reporting this happening of it frying their AV receivers and integrated amps, RCA inputs. But those cables are suspect because I know that they don't wire them properly. They don't connect them properly.
See, I was thinking along the same lines without knowing about the AudioQuest cables and how they're grounded. Any sort of, this sounds very much like some sort of power surge or a crossed wire someplace. That distortion and stuff like that, it doesn't sound like it would have anything to do with the receiver. Receivers, I mean, especially on the input side, they don't do this unless there's a speaker wire problem, and that would not kill, the distortion and the speaker going out. That I can say, oh, you've got a loose wire someplace, and then that's what's happening. But it would not kill your input. Yeah, it would not do that. So yeah, get a new cable, man.
Or
Bob's your uncle.
You probably have some cheap RCA cables lying around. If you're like the rest of it, probably came with your DVD player or something like that. They're going to work just fine for stereo analog audio. So, I mean, I guess there's no way to truly know unless you switch, you're going to use a different input. Or, I mean, if it's actually fried your RCA inputs, I'm assuming you're going to want to exchange your X3700H anyway. Like, that's kind of a regardless. But
don't tell them it was because of your stupid cables.
But once you have a replacement and you don't use those AudioQuest cables anymore, I mean, I guess you can only wait and see because
if this is the null hypothesis, right? You can't. We're trying to get it so that it doesn't do the thing that is bad. So we can't prove the null hypothesis. All we can do is plug it in with regular cables. And you know what? You spent money on, maybe somebody gave them to you after they fried their gear a bunch of times, on AudioQuest cables. So you're clearly capable of, or willing to spend some money on some cabling. You want to make sure, order from Blue Jeans.
Yes. If you want 100% certainty, order some.
That is not the cable. Order from Blue Jeans. Agreed. They will put it together properly. You know for sure it will be right. I mean, there's no doubt There is no doubt that
you can read more than one article by a man even more verbose than I about exactly why your cables should be terminated that way. Kurt Danke does not mince words and does not spare any words in explaining exactly how cables should be constructed.
Hey, the man doesn't sell cables; he writes articles by the word. That's right. That's how he makes his money.
He was a lawyer
over there. All right, Bertrand in Quebec. Bertrand is nearly set for construction to get underway in his theater in January. He is hoping we can help him finalize his plans. Our advice has already helped him decide on a 5.2.4 system with Martin Logan's Motion Series speakers, a 77-inch OLED, a Marantz receiver, and no more in-ceiling or in-wall speakers since soundproofing is a big consideration in his build. He'll be opting for Martin Logan Motion at 2i satellites for overhead speakers instead. Great. He's got some pictures
rendering diagrams to give us an idea of what he'll be dealing with.
Give him an idea. This is not perfect, but I guess that those 3 cans over the top. Those are speakers and not.
No, the 3 things on either side are lights. He's got the Atmos speakers actually close to the side walls, angled in.
I see, angled in. Right. Okay. So considering the soundproofing, he's tried to get away from in-ceiling can lights as well. He thinks he has settled on a track lighting system where the individual lights themselves can be positioned on rails. The whole room is going to be painted black. Ooh, interesting. With all black seating and acoustic panels, etc. He also nixed the idea of Philips Hue colored lights in favor of just regular white bulbs. What do we think? One of his concerns is that he might want to add a projection setup in the future. Is there any chance that the track lighting hanging down from the ceiling a bit, they could actually cast a shadow on a future projection screen? No.
I mean, long as the top of the lens of your projector and the top edge of your screen, if both of those things are below the bottom of the lights, then even if the lights are narrow enough together that they're within the light path, as long as they are above the top of the lens and the top of the screen, then the top of the lens and the top of the screen will shine their light below the lights. But maybe he's thinking that, a future projection screen could be quite close to his ceiling. We just saw another room where that's the case. Therefore, even if the projector's lens is below the lights, it would actually have to be shining its light up at a slight angle to hit the top edge of the screen. So, I mean,
you really have to worry more about where your projector is than you do your screen.
Yeah.
Because you can move your projector down and provided that you've got something with some lens shift. My problem is my projector is very close to the ceiling and I have a ceiling fan. So in order to get the image onto the screen, I had to project the image, move it as high as I could until it started running into problems with the light, and then put my screen on the wall based on that. Which means that I had to take the light fixture off, like not the light fixture, but the big
cover
dome thing off of there. So now I just have raw light bulbs up there. It looks terrible. But even in my setup, which is my projector is basically on the ceiling. I mean, it's probably 6 inches from the ceiling in my very short room. I could still get that screen up high enough for everybody to see everything without even lying down on the couch. They could see everything. If my housing and everything for my ceiling fan was no further down than 7 inches.
Okay.
With 7 inches, I could clear that even with my projector being on the ceiling. So in your case, what you're going to be worrying about is how far down can you hang your projector in order to make sure that you can hit your screen. And there's no world where I believe that these lights are lower than 4 or 5 inches, on the track lighting.
I mean, the thing is, I love a surface mount lighting system in a soundproofed room that is superior. So I love this idea of going track lighting instead. The advantage of track lighting is you can swap out the type of lights and the type of housing for those lights relatively easy. Instead of having, sort of like cylindrical shaped housings and lights, you could go for a pancake style where it's an LED light that's in there and it's sort of a pancake shape, and that's what slides into your tracks. And now you have very little depth from, below the ceiling to the bottom of those lights. You can move the lights along the track. So if you do end up with a scenario where your projector is lower and the top of your screen is a little bit higher, maybe it's only the very front lights that catch that light angle. Well, you got them on a track. You slide them back a little ways. You know, it's I think it's very flexible. He doesn't have it in his diagram. If your entire room is going to be black, having some wall sconces would not be the worst idea in the world, because if the only lights are 6 little track lights overhead and everything is black and non-reflective in here, it might genuinely be a little bit dark when it's time to have the lights on. So some sconces firing up on the walls wouldn't be the terrible idea.
Can we recommend gray here? Is black really what you want to do? Like maybe that like one wall could be black, and everything else could be dark like gray. A gray. Yeah, and maybe the ceiling a light gray, just so it's not so weird. But whatever. All right, let's scroll. Since we'll be using track lighting now and the Motion 2i speakers mounted on the ceiling rather than in the ceiling, let's open up some more options for ceiling acoustic treatments. In his diagrams, he has laid out positions basically as first reflection points for the front row and the potential back row, which would be just a sofa on the riser that he doesn't care too much about. The front row is definitely the priority. So what would we recommend for ceiling treatments and positioning? So he's got, it looks like 2 panels above him, like one sort of at that first reflection point and one behind him. As per our discussion earlier with diffusion, if you took the back one and made it into a diffuser, or maybe that combination absorber diffuser thing from
or even directly above your seats too, wouldn't be the worst.
You could do that. You know, you're going to have a lot of, you are currently planning for a lot of absorption here. I'm surprised that the size of the corner trap seems optimistic.
Well, we're coming up to that. That's a future question, specifically about those. So I like your front panel. That is basically the first reflection point there in front of your front row seats. I like that where it is.
On the ceiling, right.
I would possibly, well, actually, I would take that back panel, make that diffusers instead. Shouldn't be a problem. Get the grid fusers from GIK. It'll fit perfectly in what you've already described there. And actually, if you get the box of 4, because it looks like that's like a 2-foot by 4-foot panel that he's planned for, and you're going to have 4 of the 2-foot by 2-footers, then just put 2 directly over your front seats and 2 just behind your front seats, exactly where you've already planned a panel. And that's 1 box of grid fusers, and your ceiling is done.
Yeah. That's the only plan. He wasn't worried about the walls. He's
the walls are
right.
He's got the walls right.
The walls are fine. Yeah, the walls are fine. Let's scroll down. He has planned to run conduit for all in-wall wiring. He plans to have his gear at the front of the room below his TV, and the room will be fully carpeted. And he's toying with the idea of having the carpet come 4 to 6 inches up the walls rather than having baseboards. So what do we think is the best way to conceal all of his wires? If he sticks with in-wall conduits, can speaker wires and other top-of wires like HDMI share the same conduit, or should they each have their own? The only thing you would worry about with wiring is making sure power isn't going along the same track as your speaker wiring and all that other stuff.
Necessarily want to have speaker wire, which is an amplified sound, directly next to line level. It shouldn't be a problem with HDMI. That should be fine.
Right. Yeah, there should be plenty of
if you do have it in the same conduit as line level, the line level just needs to be shielded. It needs to be a proper shielded RCA cable. Right. Then it should be okay. But, well, I mean, honestly, the real question is, can he, instead of running everything in wall, is there a way to make this surface mount and just hide it with carpet or a curtain skirt? Because if everything is black in this room, a curtain skirt is a definite possibility for you, sir.
I kind of agree with that. That was my first thought. I don't like the idea of running the carpet up the wall. I think it's a... I
mean, I've seen that.
It seems... Yeah. I have too, and it's fine. But it seems to me like just running it regular and then... I mean, and if you still want to do conduit in the walls and everything else, that's fine.
I mean, certainly if you're going, I mean, if you're planning for a projector in the future, then definitely have conduit run, and please run a line of Romex to where the projector is going to be mounted on the ceiling, because you don't even have to terminate it right now. If you just literally have Romex that goes from where your projector is going to be to where your gear is going to be, then you can connect a male inlet close to your gear and a female outlet later. Just have the Romex already in there so that you don't have to run that at a later date to get power to your projector. So that is definitely one that we can give you. But I think surface mount for everything else, and a curtain skirt. I think a curtain skirt is the way to go, because if you were considering the carpet part way up the wall look, a curtain skirt can mimic that while also giving you ease of access, because the carpet, you're not going to be able to easily pull back and run wires and move them back there, but a curtain skirt, easy.
Right. I kind of like the idea of, you're going to call me crazy here. Not you, Rob, but maybe he will call me crazy. The baseboards are, some of the harder things to paint after like things like carpet are installed. So if you do a curtain skirt all the way around the bottom of your room, you could actually keep those all like a painted, the normal ultra white that everybody uses for, so you could paint all those ultra white and then have the curtain skirt with black fabric hanging down over the top of it. And then if you wanted to put like a wire management system in there underneath there, just so that you didn't have to worry about, loose wires on the ground, you could do that. But then when, at a later date and you're like, okay, well, we're selling the house and we need to paint this room, you're just painting the walls. Anyone can go around and paint the walls. I mean, the ceiling's going to be a pain, but anybody can go around and paint the walls. Painting baseboards is a nightmare, especially if there's carpet involved. It's much easier just to take them all off and paint them and then reinstall them than it is to try to paint them in place. But if you've already got them painted white, well, then that's what everybody's going to want anyways at a later date. So if it were me, that's what I would do. That's the same reason why I don't like the carpet up the walls. Carpet up the walls now means you have to pull the carpet out of your room if you decide that you want to change something, and that's not cost effective. So for the TV wall mount, he's a bit concerned that fastening it to the studs behind his double drywall will result in a short circuit of his soundproofing, i.e. a way for physical vibrations to transmit through the TV wall mount into the studs. Should he have some sort of frame to hold the TV separate from the drywall studs? There's no reason, if you're going to be putting all your gear up front anyways, why don't you just get a piece of furniture that holds your TV?
I mean, he actually...
And then you don't have to worry about it.
He was even talking about an extendable wall mount because he wants the TV to be a bit closer. And I'm like, just get a 3-in-1 stand. Now you can position the TV exactly where you want it to be. So yes.
That's exactly what I'll do when I upgrade when I go to 4K, is I'm going to get rid of the projector. I'm going to put the TV on a stand in the front and then move it towards my seat until it is the right viewing distance, and that'll be the end of it.
That Trans Deco one that Amazon sells that I've recommended, it even has optional casters on it. So even if you were thinking, oh, I want to be able to move the TV either just for cleaning purposes or just because I want to be able to move it forward and back, or he's thinking projector in the future and he wants to be able to push it back and then bring the screen down. I'm like, if you got a TV on a 3-in-1 mount that's on casters, you can move it that way. So, yeah.
So does he really need a battery backup? He's concerned it might generate audible noise. And if he doesn't need to pay the extra, what surge protector would we recommend? You need a battery backup.
Get a battery backup. The type of gear that you're willing to put in here and to skimp out on that?
Right. That's not where it's not where you cut the corners. Audible noise from battery backups is not something I've experienced significantly. I've got more noise coming from the power supply on my Xbox One than I do from the battery backup. Now, when the battery backup kicks in, there's all sorts of alarms and bells that go off.
I mean, when it's actually on battery because the power is in blackout, then you'll hear it buzzing. I don't hear anything from I have a Panamax. I don't have the APCs, but there's no reason to think that there's not a lot of heat that's being generated. I think he was reading about the like online batteries where it's always running the battery. And I think he was maybe reading about that. Those generate noise all the time. But that's not what we're talking about. Get one of the gaming performance APC units. They're, about $200, quite reasonably priced. Even in Canada, you can order the 1350 from Amazon.ca, and I think it's $225 Canadian right now. So that's the way to go.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I just flicked off of there. A big concern is HVAC. New ducts and vents for this room are going to be moved and installed regardless. So what does he need to discuss and decide with his contract in order to maintain the best soundproofing? So we talk about live end dead end, or not live end dead end, the dead vent
which he was
system.
About.
Yeah,
I mean, even soundproofing company is like, don't do that anymore. It's just not giving people the results.
So the one thing you really want to do is you want to make sure that the sound that's going to be going out from your home theater into the rest of your room, it doesn't have a very easy path to get into the rest of your house. So that means flexible conduit, not conduit, but the ducting, and have it make a couple of turns. I mean, even if it's, even if it's just up in your attic, like swirled around or something like that, so that the sound as it goes by, because those things can be insulated, and this will deaden the sound as it's coming out of your home theater. You're by decoupling the subwoofer from the rest of the room and making sure that the walls are decoupled from the studs, you're doing a lot. So this is just one flanking path that you're going to have to worry about. But
it is
you're not really
important and big one, though.
Yeah. So this is, by using, the kind of the best practices here. And it's something that your contractors will be like, what? What do you mean? And you're just going to have to say, listen, I know this doesn't, this is not how you normally do it, but this is how I want you to do it. And you'll have to show them a diagram or have them read an article or whatever.
I mean, the biggest thing that you can do, and this might significantly increase your cost if it's not easily done in your existing HVAC system, but the biggest thing you can do is that most houses, I believe this is a basement, but I'm not 100% sure. I mean, what most houses will have is sort of one main trunk that comes off of your furnace and off of your air conditioner if they're sharing. They'll have one big main trunk, the big rectangular square one that goes all the way across your house, and then that has arms that branch off of it that go to each room. If you can find a way to have, the best would be a direct connection that only goes to this theater back to your furnace and air conditioner. It does not share the main trunk at all. Or if it must share something, that it is on a sub trunk, not on that main trunk. Because the problem is if you have rigid ducts that all connect to one big central trunk, which is standard for a house. Of course, that's the most efficient way to do it.
Right.
But if you have that, then that's how the vibrations can get to every other room in your house. Naturally, any ducting that is shared amongst rooms is the easiest way for that sound to travel. So the maximum way you can soundproof is by having a run that only goes to this theater from your furnace and air conditioner. Naturally, that's the most expensive thing to do. But that is the number one way. If you must have a sub-trunk, then have it with a flexible connector, at least at some point. It doesn't have to be flexible duct the entire way, but make sure that there is a flexible connection, particularly where it joins that sub-trunk, and then anytime that it's entering the room. Those places have a flexible connector, and that'll minimize the physical vibration that makes its way through.
All right, so he'll be getting his acoustic panels from Acoustic Panels Canada, but they don't offer triangular corner bass traps, and he would like to have those floor to ceiling. He's found some on Amazon and AeroZoom that aren't expensive. Should you go with those or something else?
Don't get those. Those are foam. Don't get those.
The AeroZoom ones are foam. Yeah. Yes, they're form corner traps, and they're not very thick.
Yeah, and the Amazon ones that he was talking about that aren't very expensive, same thing. They're the foam triangular traps. Don't get those. Waste of money.
Yeah. So, you do have a contractor who's going to be in here, who's building all this stuff. So the easiest thing to do would just to have him build you some corner traps. The same way we talk about with the chunk traps.
Yeah.
Super chunk traps. And this is easy enough to show him how you want it done. It's just, rigid fiberglass board, cut into triangles, and stack floor to ceiling. It will be deeper than what your image is showing here.
Right.
Because a front
it doesn't
panel,
have to be if you're willing to make more cuts, because you can cut it to the size that you want. You'll just have waste material, that's all.
Well, you could make them basically cut the 4x2 panel in half and then cut each one of those halves into 4 triangles. But then you're talking about a very, there won't be a lot of thickness to those corner traps.
1 foot sides and then, 1 squared plus
whatever
1
it is.
Square root. It's square root of 2.
Yeah, whatever that is.
I don't know the square root of 2 off the top of my head.
So it will not be a very deep corner trap, which sort of defeats the purpose. So that is going to make a difference on where your speakers can be placed slightly.
Right. The other thing you can do is the walls are all up, the drywall's all up, and then you just have your contractor make some frames in the corner and you just put insulation in those frames and cover them with fabric. This can definitely be constructed instead of purchased, for sure. But regardless, don't get the foam ones. That is just a waste. I mean, the thing is, Acoustic Panels Canada can build these for you. It would just cost more. They're not a standard thing, but they can build panels. They won't necessarily be triangles, but they can make 4-inch thick rectangles that have beveled edges that'll fit into the corners. So you can commission them to do that if you absolutely want to purchase them. I would probably just have your contractor, though, either make super chunks or just put in some stick framing, and you just cover that with fabric.
That's right. What they'll probably do, and I don't know how your contractor works, but my contractor would do stuff like that, but he would want me to get all the go purchase all the materials for him, and then he'd tell me how much to purchase, and I'd go out there and get it. Your contractor may say you can do that, or I can do it for you. It's just going to cost you more for me to go drive around and go pick up stuff that you could do. So you can cut down the cost slightly just by being helpful. So he set up a Plex server on his Synology NAS. It seems to be working well so far. His main streaming source is Netflix. Could he just use Plex and the Netflix apps that are built into a CX OLED? He plans to have a Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Is there any way for Plex to match that quality, or will it always be inferior? I don't know anything about that.
It can absolutely match the quality. It can be 1-for-1 to the same quality via Plex, but you won't get that maximum quality. You could on the video side, but not on the audio side by using the built-in apps. The built-in Netflix app of your C10 OLED is almost the highest quality, except everything will be coming out at 60 frames per second. It will not switch itself to 24 frames per second. So if you want maximum quality, grab yourself an NVidia Shield. I would recommend rather highly just pay the $50 extra and get the NVIDIA Shield Pro. People are still reporting some little, buffering issues with the tube version that doesn't seem to have enough RAM to play back Ultra HD Blu-rays smoothly that are being sent from a Plex server. So pay the little bit extra, get the Shield Pro, and that'll do both of these things wonderfully.
So for music, he's in the Apple ecosystem, and he figures he'd just like to use his iPhone to select what music he's listening to. With his Marantz receiver, what will be the best way to ensure he's getting the best music quality?
AirPlay.
I mean, just AirPlay, right? Yeah. I mean, you can AirPlay directly to the receiver.
Yes, you can.
So
your Marantz already has AirPlay built right into it. If you were already going to use your iPhone to select what music is playing, you just AirPlay it. It is lossless. It is full CD quality, and that's it. You're done.
All right. Finally, after up to A through I. With the dude, you just blew all your questions all at once. So we'll see you in a couple of months, maybe. Manuel's brother is very interested in the $3,000 NAD T778 receiver. Manuel is thinking he could save a lot of money by going with Denon, Marantz, or Yamaha instead, which typically seem to be our recommendations. But what do we think? I think if you want to have a receiver that doesn't have HDMI 2.1, you could spend a lot less money than $3,000 on it, because that's what the NAD has. I mean, the NAD is
it doesn't have HDMI 2.1 yet.
That's what I just said.
Yeah, it
doesn't have HDMI 2.1. What it does have is the promise that it'll get it someday through their system
modular construction design system. I think is
the reason NAD hates me so much is because I think that is a BS system for because they keep telling you that once you buy this one receiver, they'll keep releasing components for it so that you can never have to buy another one again. Which is weird because they keep releasing more receivers over the year. It just
tends to be that when a new interface or a new codec comes out, you need new processing chips, and those aren't so easily replaced with a little daughter card. But that said, $3,000 for the NAD T778 is not like drastically higher than, say, the flagship Denon or Marantz. In fact, it can be less expensive than the flagship Marantz. And then it's the difference between the room correction systems, because the NAD is coming with Dirac Live. And, if you particularly want Dirac, NAD is actually one of the least expensive ways for getting that in an AV receiver. So if the reason your brother chose it is that he really, really wants Dirac, I don't have any problem going with the NAD. What I would say is that he might want to consider getting those one model down, the 758 version 3 now, I think. No, so there's an I in there somewhere too because they added AirPlay. But whatever the latest version of the 758, you can save quite a bit of money, still get NAD, still get DRAC, and it still has all the capabilities. It just doesn't have as many amplifiers built in, but it has the pre-outs to expand that with whatever amps that you want. So that's about the only thing I would really say there, because I don't have a big problem going with these. It's not like the $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 price point. So to get a full 11-channel receiver and then with that level of room correction, it's not outlandish. I don't have a big problem with it.
So my problem with NAD has always been that, you know, this promise of the unlimited upgrades forever and ever, you know, has never materialized, even though they claim it has, but it really hasn't. And the reason, like Rob said, is because there are some parts of it you just can't switch out. There's only so much. But on top of that, it's also not free. It's not like a firmware up there. You got to send your receiver in, or, you know, usually you have to send the receiver in and they swap out some part for a different part, and then you pay shipping both ways plus, you know, however many hundreds of dollars it's going to be for the new chipset. For me, it's just cheaper to wait until next year. But if, like Rob said, if it is DRAC that he cares about, not just he thinks NAD looks cool or NAD is cool,
or just read about
it. If it's not a specific feature that only NAD has, like DRAC, I would just get something else. There's just more. I would go Yamaha right now. I mean, we've already said that once on this podcast, but yes, I would go Yamaha right now. But, you know, we'll see. You let us know what he decides to do. Andrew's our model spaceship guy. So Andrew is thinking he'd like to add a pair of Zone 2 speakers. He's using a Denon X3600H receiver to power his 5.1.4 setup. So first up, will that be capable of letting him play the same source in the main zone and in Zone 2 at the same time? I don't know.
Luckily, sir, you have an X3600H, which was the one and only model that year in Denon's lineup that did let you play the same thing in the main zone and Zone 2 at the same time without mixing all of it to 2-channel. You do have to turn on Zone 2 and then set its, you get to set what source is playing in Zone 2. You have to set it to the source that is labeled source. It's kind of weird. I don't know why they chose that nomenclature, but if you set Zone 2's source to the one that is called source, then it will continue playing whatever is playing in your main zone in full Atmos immersive audio and create a 2-channel down mix that goes out of the Zone 2 outputs. So you are in luck. You got the perfect receiver to do what you want to do.
So he could pick up a Sony DH190 stereo integrated amp for a reasonable price. Is that a good choice to power his Zone 2? I don't see why not. Yeah, because it's going to. I mean, fine. It's just be fine. And and you have your own volume control and everything on that.
Yeah, the Zone 2 pre-outs. What I would recommend is on the X3600H, it has the option for its Zone 2 pre-outs to be set to either fixed or variable. And if you set it to fixed, you can choose what volume level is coming out of the Zone 2 pre-outs. And that's what I would do. I would rely on the Sony at that point since it has its own volume. The Sony is what you will use to change the volume in Zone 2 rather than, switching your remote control back and forth to change the Zone 2 volume that's coming out of the Denon. I'd set the Denon to be fixed.
Even with a Harmony remote, that's a
little hassle.
Irksome thing. Yeah.
So I'd set the Denon to be fixed, and then, that's a perfectly fine thing to power your Zone 2 is that Sony DH190.
So which speakers should he try? He's been a Paradigm fan for years, but this is a chance to maybe try something a little bit different. Although he's still neutral, accurate sounds. So the KEF Q350, something else. He's in Canada. So some of our typical online brands end up costing a lot more than in the US. Yeah. Well, there's lots of Canadian brands that sound like Paradigms.
PSB is a front runner for sure. Give those a try.
Right. So KEFs would be good. Sure. They'd be different. Yeah. I don't think RBH would be in your probably in your price range. It's not easy to get in Canada. No. Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of eager for him to try something truly different, like maybe some Martin Logans, like not necessarily electrostatics, but the ones the Motion series with their folded ribbons or something, because they aren't wildly expensive. They're kind of reasonable for a brand you can buy at Best Buy. So I'm kind of yeah, maybe try that out.
I guess I would just go to Best Buy, just take a look at what's there and say, this is a funky looking speaker. What's your return policy?
Right.
Just take it home and listen to it for a little bit. You might love it, and you might come up with something. This is not something that I would. I mean, normally I would say, hey, SVS Ultras. The Ultra bookshelves.
Which,
or something
he
like that.
mentioned himself, it's just they are considerably more expensive, all things, once you get them in Canada, yeah.
Well, even the Prime, the Prime ones or whatever, I mean, those would all be good choices, but why? Why limit yourself to good choices when you can just go and listen to just about anything you want? Just make sure you have that good return policy on them, and you don't drop them when you're installing them. Shawn has an old stereo receiver in his garage with a pair of speakers. He just wants a cheap, easy way to stream Spotify without having to plug his phone into the receiver. The Chromecast Audio, now defunct, would have been the perfect, since he either needs a stereo analog or optical connection, but that device has been discontinued and unavailable for a while, and everything else seems to use HDMI. What can he use? So when I want Spotify or anything like that, so the two things I would look for would be, and so he's got a stereo receiver. So the two things I would look for is a headphone jack, because that can be used to go out directly to your receiver, or like you said, your optical connection. But I would look for DTS Play-Fi as for the device itself, or I would just, basically any sort of the room. As long as you don't care about being spied on by Google or Amazon, you can use any of the room, the room, what do you call them, Rob? Stupid voice assistants.
Oh, the voice assistants. Well, yeah, that's actually what I would recommend here.
Any of those things, because they almost all have a headphone output and then maybe an optical with it.
Not all of them.
They usually have a headphone. Well, like I said, that's what I would look for.
Right.
But there are devices out there that are DTS Play-Fi, and DTS Play-Fi allows you to connect any number of systems, and it actually works pretty well as far as setting up zones if you end up adding more of them as time goes on.
They're not usually cheap though with DTS Play-Fi. That's
I don't know. Does he say cheap?
Yeah, he wants cheap, because it's just garage. He just wants something where, like, the sounds from his phone aren't going to be interrupting his music, because he could just plug his phone in, but then the sounds from his phone interrupt things. So, that's why he wants a standalone. Well, the Chromecast Audio is nice because you can start it on your phone, but then it streams it itself. It isn't actually pulling it over Bluetooth from your phone or something. So I would suggest getting an Amazon Echo Dot, and not the newest one, not the Sphere, the third generation one that they're still selling. It's only $25, so I think that counts as cheap. And that one, the third generation Amazon Echo Dot, the one that looked like a little puck, does have a 3.5 output jack, a line out stereo 3.5. So you'll need a little adapter that turns 3.5 stereo into the red and white RCA plugs, but that's easy to. In fact, I think one even comes in the box, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not, but regardless, that's easy enough to get. But yeah, I think that's the one to go for. Amazon Echo Dot, and the third generation one that looks like a little hockey puck.
So the only problems I've run into when I'm streaming with my Echo Dot, because I do the same thing in my kitchen, is it will, and I haven't figured out how to turn this off, and I haven't really tried that hard, but it will occasionally just decide that you're not paying attention anymore, and it will turn itself off in the middle of listening to your music, which is particularly irksome when you're listening to an album.
Right.
So like so my son and my wife really love Hamilton, so occasionally they'll say, "She Who Shall Not Be Named, play Hamilton," and then the album will start, and about just right around the halfway mark, if you haven't interacted with the device at all, it will shut itself off. And then you say, "Hey, resume," and it's like, "What are you talking about? You weren't doing anything."
Does it do that if you
completely forgets?
Activate it from the app instead of from voice, though?
I don't know. I don't normally activate it from the app,
right?
But I do, I do activate it from voice pretty much exclusively. So I don't see why that would be any different.
Well, because the voice one, it's flakier with the voice, because it just assumes you're going to talk to it for some reason, like all the time. Whereas if you do it on the app, it's like, oh, you actually took the time to like push some buttons, so I'm going to act like a normal device now.
Yeah, but who's going to go around pressing buttons? Because their apps.
But he was already going to do things from his phone anyways. So
Yeah, watch how long that lasts when he can just say,
That's
hey, play
true.
Spotify. So, we'll see. Clara on Twitter. Clara is using a Sony X900H TV with a Denon X6400H receiver. The older NVIDIA 2017 Shield is plugged into the receiver, which then feeds the TV. By default, the Shield sets its output to 4K. It's basically 60 hertz, 420, 8-bit with Rec 709 colors.
Yeah.
But the colors don't look right, especially flesh tones where everybody looks too red, especially in dim scenes. All the advanced output settings were examined, and forcing the Shield to Rec 2020 color output fixes the image, but Rec 2020 is only available at 12-bit and only at 30 hertz or lower. So how do we get it to output 4K 60 with the correct colors? So after considerable back and forth on Twitter, Rob can explain what happened, what ended up being the issue, but along with that info, why? Why on earth are the settings this complicated, and how many people out there must be in a situation where they don't even notice they are seeing correct colors, and even if they do, they'd have absolutely no idea how to fix it or whom to ask in order to get it right? Well, before we go there, I want to introduce you to something called Vivid Mode, and it's where 90% of the TVs in the world seem to be set. And I walk into the house, and you walk into the house, and you go, what is happening with the TV, and why does it look this way? And honestly, it's not that you have to be that much of an enthusiast to notice these things. And I hate doing the my wife thing, but we went to an Airbnb because of our kitchen remodel, and my wife noticed the soap opera effect at an Airbnb. She said, why does it look so funny? Now, she didn't notice it day one or day two, but after watching enough TV, she's like, why does this TV look so funny? And that's all she could articulate and about it. But because she was experiencing good settings at home, she was able eventually to go, this isn't right. It doesn't look right, and I don't know why. Now, you are correct in that most people won't know where to get the right answer, or even how to articulate the question properly to figure out what is wrong with their TV. It's going to take quite a bit of learning to get to that point. But for most people, their TVs come home, they get set on the wall or on the stand, they get turned on, and that's it. And then however the TV looks, that's what they think it's supposed to look like, because what's their frame of reference?
There are still people with stretched images on their televisions because they have never stopped watching standard dynamic or standard definition television channels.
Right.
So people are still stretched on their TVs, and they think that's what high definition is. Yeah, but more specifically on this one, so I mean, I guess I have to go through to then explain what the heck people are supposed to do about this, which, as you say, is just confusing and not automatic. But so the first thing I asked was, because this is a setting that's kind of unique to the NVIDIA Shield, is under the Shield's advanced display settings, it has this little option for match the content color space. And yes, this is pictures of my own, so color is spelled with a U. If you're looking at it on YouTube. But this match content color space sounds like a good thing because it says it will automatically switch your display between Rec 2020 and Rec 709. But it doesn't work right. It just flat out doesn't work right. It will switch itself from Rec 2020 to Rec 709, and that transition will be okay. But then when it tries to go back to 2020, it's stuck in 709, and those 2020 colors that are actually coming out of the Shield are now trying to be rendered by something that's expecting 709, and everybody looks way too red and everything is overblown and too vivid. And that was why I suspected that first. So I asked Clara, is that match content color space setting on? Because that was my top suspect. And Clara said, that has been turned off. So like, okay. So the next thing I wanted to check was I ended up digging out my own 2017 NVIDIA Shield because I'm onto the 2019 Shield Pro now, but I dug out my 2017, which was harder to find than it should have been because I'm not organized. But I looked at my options connecting that to my Sony Z9D television, which is not exactly the same as the X900H, but at least it was Sony for Sony. And even by default, mine set itself to 4K resolution, 59.94 hertz, but 420 10-bit with Rec 2020, and that is how I use my NVIDIA Shield. I leave it in Rec 2020 at all times because it does a very good job of putting 709 color content into a 2020 container, and then your colors do look correct. And so when I was talking to Clara and she put her NVIDIA Shield into Rec 2020 mode, albeit at only 23.976 hertz instead of 60, the colors did look correct. So we're like, okay, we're pretty sure it is that color space thing. And getting the NVIDIA Shield to output 2020 worked. But why can I get 60 hertz and 10-bit, and Clara could only get 23 hertz or 24 hertz and 12-bit? I had all these color space options. Clara did not. So then I was like, okay, could this be an HDMI issue? Because you have to set your television's HDMI inputs to the enhanced mode. And by default, they're in the standard mode. So like, this is Sony for Sony. And you're like, okay, where would I find that? Would it be under HDMI settings? Would it be under picture settings? Because we're dealing with the picture. No, it's under a setting called external inputs. And this is the case. It's not going to be that exact name, but most televisions have an inputs setting. And that's where you're typically going to find this. On the Sony, they call it the HDMI signal format under the external inputs. And on mine, you can switch between standard and enhanced. But on the X900H, there's even a third option because they have an enhanced format, which is for 4K 60 and 10-bit signals. And then they have a second enhanced format, which is only for Dolby Vision. You know, just clear as mud.
Of course.
And out of the box, guess which one is used? Oh, standard. Neither of those things. Let's not do any of the advanced Dolby Vision or the 10-bit and 4K 60 that I bought this television for. Let's just stick to HDMI 1.4 out of the box. So, Clara checked on that. Set to enhanced. It should be working. Not the Dolby Vision version, because the 2017 NVIDIA Shield doesn't do Dolby Vision, but set to enhanced. So what ended up being the issue, and the reason why Clara's was limiting itself to only 20 or 30 hertz and lower, and only this 12-bit version when setting it to Rec 2020, was because the AV receiver also has to be set to HDMI enhanced instead of HDMI standard, and that was the one setting that Clara had overlooked. Now, Clara's like, oh, I'm willing to say that I'm a dummy. I'm like, no, you're not a dummy. That's like the farthest thing from a dummy to have like missed that setting, because once again, it's like not even where you would expect to find it in the menu tree. You have to go searching for your HDMI signal format output and switch the darn thing to enhanced. So like, that's the solution. You had to have the correct HDMI enhanced setting in the television. You had to have the correct HDMI enhanced setting in the AV receiver. And then even with all of that, you had to have the NVIDIA Shield turn off its color match feature, which looks like the exact thing that you would want to have turned on. Absolutely not intuitive. And how would a person who has no idea that AVRant exists, that has no idea that AVS Forum exists, that just went to Best Buy, bought an AV receiver and a television because they said, hey, these are the newest, greatest 4K TV and AV receiver, and bought an NVIDIA Shield, connected them, yeah, a picture shows up, and they're like, would they even notice that it doesn't all look quite right? And if they did, how would they know to find these settings? They're not even where you think you should look.
I'll be honest with you. So all of that I agree with,
right,
except for the NVIDIA Shield part of it.
That they probably wouldn't end up with that?
I don't think that people would buy an NVIDIA Shield. I don't think that truly newbie, just going into Best Buy, people would buy an NVIDIA Shield. I think they'd buy an Apple 4K or a
Roku.
Chromecast,
they very
or a
well
Roku.
might buy a Roku.
So those three, I think, are the most common things they're going to buy. I think NVIDIA Shield shows that you have a user of a higher level. So yes, I agree. This is all very stupid. Okay, there's just no doubt about that. This is all because, you know, when we program things, you know, we're not always thinking about the end user, and we're not always thinking about all the interactions, and there's deficiencies there that happen. We see this all the time. Over time, things get easier. You know, how long did it take before auto sensing the right, you know, sound mode worked in HDMI. It took a bit.
Yep.
It took them a while to figure that out. And we're right there with video again. With HD for a long time, it's like, well, is it HD or is it SD? What am I supposed to do? Blah, blah, blah.
And I mean, these HDMI 2.1 issues that we do have, where you basically have to make this choice between supporting Dolby Vision or supporting 4K 120, where even if you're supporting 4K 120, will it also support variable refresh rate? And that's a question mark. Like, yeah, it's just getting more and more complex, to be honest. And if we can get the auto detection to work right, okay. But I mean, as soon as you throw an AV receiver into the mix, it definitely starts messing things up. Like, why does it default to standard instead of enhanced? Well, I guess because they have to assume that your oldest devices you want to work and your newest devices will give you an image, just not the image you paid for. So,
right.
Like, I guess some image is better than your old device gives you no image at all. That's going to get us more customer support calls than I didn't notice that, yeah, I'm getting an image, but it's not as good as it could have been.
Yeah, HDR is just dark. Right. Doesn't everybody know that? That's what HDR means. It's dark.
So I don't have a fantastic answer. I don't really know what's to be done about it other than telling everyone to come talk to us, I guess. But
tell your friends, AVRant, question at AVRant.com. We'll fix your NVidia Shield too.
That's it. We made it to the end of our topic list. It's crazy time.
We got it for the first time ever. Merry Christmas.
Christmas miracle.
Happy end of the year. We got to the end of the topic list for the first time, and I cannot remember how long.
I think it was about a year ago.
We were for Halloween a couple of years ago. Yeah, about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we got to the end when you and I did 2 podcasts, and I did a podcast behind your back with Lee to actually clear out the topic list at the beginning of last year. I think that is the last time.
Yeah, well, there we go. If you want your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Do I say anything else after that? I don't know. That's about it.
Well, we thank our listeners of the week. That's what we do.
Oh, that's why I'm on the wrong page. That's why I'm a little confused. Okay, hold on here. Where is the right page? Okay, there it is. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Manuel for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and going to the PayPal donation site, as well as our 127 patrons over at patreon.com, including Bertrand.
Indeed, Manuel. Thank you very much for that PayPal donation. Really do appreciate that. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anyone who would like to sign up to be a subscriber, a automatic donor every month to our podcast. Very nice of the 127 patrons that we have to do that. Bertrand, thank you very much for being one of them.
I want to thank Kevin for talking us up to Accessories for Less than SVS, and Jason for buying Rob a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin, thanks very much for the shout-outs.
Did I lose you?
Sorry?
Can you hear me?
I can hear Tom. I don't know what, right at the end here. But yes, Kevin, thanks for the shout-out to Accessories for Less and SVS. Jason, thank you very much for buying me a copy of Ford vs. Ferrari on Ultra HD Blu-ray. Very nice of you to do that.
And thanks to Paul, Kevin, Gurinder, Bertrand, JR, and Chris for their notes of gratitude. Thank you, guys.
Indeed, Paul, Kevin, Gurinder, Bertrand, JR, and Chris. Really do appreciate the notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going and the notes of encouragement. And you know what? So my family and I, like my sister and her husband and their kids and my parents and I, were like, okay, if the weather holds up, we'll try to see each other outside, spaced apart,
right.
Have, I don't know, some sausage rolls on Christmas Eve, because we're not going to get together physically on Christmas Day, but maybe Christmas Eve or something. It's snowing heavy right now. It was supposed, the forecast said cloudy on Monday, sunny on Tuesday, a slightly overcast on Wednesday, Thursday. It's snowing pretty darn heavily out there right now. That might not happen. We're probably going to stick to Zoom. But Merry Christmas, everybody. It might be a white Christmas here.
Merry Christmas. That's right. Merry Christmas to all the AVRant listeners. We will see you next year.
Yes.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andre.
And I'm Rob H. Now, stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.